because of the influx of people that are coming in. I remember I first stepped into an Orthodox church 20 odd years ago, and it's very different from what I encounter in the discourse about Orthodoxy now. So I think all of us are scrambling and trying to figure out how to think about catechesis now. Because it used to be you would sit with your priest and maybe it was one-on-one. I think most parishes, and maybe some of them still do one-on-one catechesis, and that made sense because you might have one or two inquirers or somebody who wants to marry somebody in the parish, right? And now you can have, like, nobody knows who I am. I just realized. I just jumped in.
We listen to you.
I'm Father Daniel Greason. I'm the rector at St. Peter and St. Paul Orthodox Church, just about 20 minutes up the road, roughly, in Burr Ridge. I am the director of the Department of Education for the Diocese of the Midwest. Also, the St. Macrina Institute was, I'll use the word dissolved by Vladika. And there was the institution of the St. John of Chicago Pastoral Institute, which will house a diaconal and a catechist track, which he then put me as the director of that venture. We're also looking and are going to be developing adult education opportunities beyond, partly to help alleviate the stress and the pressure that parishes have of trying to offer adult education, not at a catechetical level, but the next step beyond that, because I think that is one of the challenges that we all have. You might get all the basics down, but then people want to learn a little bit more, to discuss these things about technology in the home, etc. So that was part of the reason why I was asked to chair this panel, and so I'm thankful to be here. So I'm going to jump right in, as I was already starting to jump right in. I'm going to jump right back in.
Introduce the rest of the panel.
Oh, yes. Anna Strelka is a lay catechist at Holy Resurrection in Palatine, Illinois. Father Stephen is in Columbus, Ohio at St. Gregory of Nyssa. And then Rick Wolf is here, and I have seen you do many Facebook live streams with Father Paul Janakos doing Steps of St. Paul or Bible, so he's a lay catechist here at this parish. We're trying to have clergy and lay catechist perspectives. We're going to each talk for about 10 minutes and interact a little bit, and then we're going to open it up because I'm sure everyone has all sorts of questions. Good? All right, now I'm going to jump back in. So, one of the things that I think about in the change that has occurred in the past 6 years, or I've been a priest for almost 8, and the change that I've seen in that time is the need for catechesis. I'm going to kind of focus on some key points. Is that catechesis has to be organized. You need to actually sit down and create a syllabus. It's something that everyone can refer to, that has expectations. I mean, some of this might sound kind of duh, but before, everything was very ad hoc, and I think you have to get organized because you're not going to be able to do the one-on-one stuff that you might have used to do. You're going to have to get organized. But in that organization and drawing upon resources, I think one of the focuses that you need to have when you are teaching catechesis is that you're focused on experiential things. You are not doing a classroom. Right? I say syllabus and everyone starts to think, oh, I'm running a classroom. You're not running a classroom. You are forming souls. I like to talk about as you're coming in a choir and then you are going to come into the catechumenate, we're trying to prepare your roots so that you can begin to grow those roots. And that means when you teach the doctrines of the church, that you're teaching them experientially, liturgically, ascetically. The Christology, the Trinitarian aspects of things how does this affect your prayer life? How does this affect your struggle with sin? And not just you read a book about the history of the ecumenical councils and you get up and you share it as a book report with everybody in the class, right? The thing that flows from this is how to wed. So there's organized and experiential at the same time. And the next thing is theoretical and practical, that you are speaking theologically about the practices and history and the life of the church and giving the theology behind it. But then you are also in your catechesis focusing on practices, because the roots that people are going to grow is their experience in prayer, their experience of attending the services, them beginning to experiment with fasting, right? That they need to be shown the practices. Don't assume that they're going to just pick this up through osmosis. They're not. You're going to have to get very practical, and you're going to have to do that throughout the entire catechesis. So theoretical, you are talking theologically and experiential, but then you're also having to pick up the prayer book and actually show them how to interact with the prayer book, right? That you're going to have to maybe have a recipe swap night with people who have been fasting for 10, 20, 30 years, where everyone shares their recipes, right? Because as I tell inquirers in catechesis, it's very easy to get lost at the point of fasting. You're going to have to go down aisles of the supermarket you've never been down before, right? Especially as Americans. The next thing that this is a great opportunity for the church, because this catechesis needs to be communal. It's communal and it's individual, but it's communal because it requires, catechesis is not, again, the priest one-on-one, but it needs to be, and it's an opportunity for the church to grow in communion. By that I mean those who already exist in the parish, this becomes an opportunity for them to have the ability to grow themselves in the faith. Where are you going to get sponsors? You to engage with and provide a platform for the whole community to be involved in the catechesis, not just the priest, right? This also then is individual formation, that is where the priest is sitting down and schedules out the time. You need to know your people and the people that are coming in. But this also doesn't mean that you are doing that on your own, but that you're connecting people with people in the parish who can go and have coffee with them. At my last parish, one Lazarus Saturday, I think we brought in almost 30 people all at once, just down in Tennessee. That is a lot of people to sit down and have coffee with as the priest. It's too much if you're actually trying to be balanced. So you have to find and recruit and employ lay parishioners who have these skills to be able to help them. I'll watch my time here. I'm going to give myself 2 more minutes, even though I have a lot more things here. One of the things that I think we need to think about in regards to catechesis is that this is, I like to call it, a therapy of conversion. When people are walking in the door, especially the folks that we encounter now, or at least I have mostly encountered, they have been formed by formlessness. They have been formed by the vacuums in their life, the remnants of family life, the absence of parents, the absence of good role models, the ubiquity and addiction to the internet, where they basically live their entire life online, everything. That's why they're actually at your church, is because they encountered orthodoxy online. That's just the truth of it. And so you can try, and I do the question, what are you listening to? And I try to give them good content, because I can't swim against the tsunami completely. I'm not going to expect an addict to go cold turkey, but I have to give them something. I have cut off certain things that I think are not going to be helpful, but this formlessness that they come in, they have been shaped. And this is going to be a challenge for your parish. It's been a challenge at every parish that I've been at, because it is an opportunity for growth for everyone, But there is, in my experience of folks coming in, that formlessness is strong. And it is something that is going to require the entire parish. I remember one, and this will be my last comment, and I'm going to hand it off, a situation where I had to say, I am the priest, but I can't be your dad. I cannot dad everybody. I have 4 kids. I'm their dad. But that means, that's why I focus on the communal aspect. And it's an opportunity for our parishes, but it's really different than what was historically, I think. We got used to a kind of life in the 80s and 90s that church was kind of a commodity and thing that we can go to and kind of check the box like a Costco or something, and then we go home. But like church going forward, I think is going to require more of us, all of us, not just the priest, but everybody, in order to create form of healthiness that will be the osmosis. But it's not going to be easy. And I'm going to stop talking, or let's keep going and going.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. I wanted to talk first about my path to becoming a lay catechist. And I had heard of the concept. I knew there were catechists in the early church. I had heard priests preach about St. Nicholas of Japan and how he trained lay people to be catechists to assist him in converting the people, because they were among the people and knew the language and so forth and could relate to them. And every time I heard about this idea of being a catechist, I thought, wow, I'd like to do that. And one day I kind of got up the nerve to say to my priest, do you think I could prepare to do that? And he said, when do you want to start? Because he was overwhelmed with, having the time to catechize people. In those days, we had what I'd say was a steady trickle of catechumens, at 1, 2, 3 at a time. Currently, I had 15 people sign up for catechesis after going through an introduction for inquirers. Not all of them have persisted over the months, but about half of them, I would say. But the way I started was I sort of apprenticed myself to the priest. He was dealing with a group of catechumens and was taking them through step by step, and I just sat in. And he invited me to chime in with ideas and so forth. And then when we got the second cohort of catechists where I was assisting him, he said, Anna, why don't you do the next lesson? And from then on, we kind of team taught. Later, he trusted me. I'm very fortunate that he trusted me to catechize the third group on my own. And I checked in with him. He would stop in. He would contribute a few words. And then sometime after that, I entered the St. Macrina program. 4 years later, I completed that. So I've been catechizing since 2004, basically. We have one other lay catechist in my parish, and I take one cohort, and then in the course of time, we get another group, she takes the next one. So that's how we've been working. And then I also wanted to talk a little about how is the pastor of your church involved. You can be a huge help to him in terms of his time and the attention that, as Father Daniel said, is so divided among the many new people who are flooding our churches. First thing is, of course, you do nothing without his blessing. This has to start with your priest being willing to equip the saints by bringing along a catechist. You have to agree with him on the content, the format, what text you're going to use. And, you have to know when to refer pastoral issues to him when they're beyond your capacity. And make sure that if he's not going to team teach with you, make sure he's welcome to drop in anytime and see what you're doing. And, always be responsible to him. I regard my priest as my mentor. For years and years, I've listened to him discussing the church with inquirers and visitors and so forth, and have learned from him how to discern what's behind a question. Or, when somebody asks a question that you can't answer in an orthodox way, in a straightforward way, how to rephrase that question so that you can then answer it. So, it's good to have wonderful examples in your clergy and be on the same page with them at all times. And one thing I found a challenge is, now that my priest trusts me to do catechesis, after I've been doing it for about 10 years and had developed a pretty solid syllabus and way of doing things, he said to me, I haven't been to one of your classes in a while. Maybe I should sit in on the next session. And it was great because he added to the interest in the class, of course, and then he was able to participate in the exciting work of catechesis. Because if you love the church, and especially if you're a convert, as I was, but it's been 50 years ago, you relive that excitement with your catechumens. It is so rewarding. And your priest is able to, once you feel confident, your priest is able to participate without his having to prepare. He can just be there as an additional resource and chime in on everything. And I think it's really wonderful if you can develop that relationship with him. One challenge I've had is to make sure, even though you have a lot of catechumens perhaps now in this surge, to make sure that they do develop that relationship with the priest, because he's going to be their confessor, their spiritual father, and you need to foster their relationship with him. And I think Father Daniel made a good point that maybe that's something you need to schedule. Maybe it could be coffee. Maybe they could just hang around after Vespers or whenever the priest does confessions and, have a chat with him after the other people's confessions or whatever. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
Father Stephen Fraze. Some topics I was asked to address was, what are some key elements of a successful catechism program? And going off what Father Daniel said, that syllabus, and Anna mentioned, you have a syllabus, you should have like a list of topics you're going to cover. Somebody should be able to see what you talk about. I'll give some teacher talk phrases here, but plan your work, work your plan. Now, what I go beyond the syllabus is each of my lessons. This is the public school teacher me coming out. Objectives, like when I start a lesson, that usually, because I rabbit trail a whole lot during the lessons, it'll take multiple sessions maybe to get through a lesson. What are the objectives? I review those objectives every single time. Somebody coming in their classes, in public education, they're called I can statements. They were something different when I started teaching somebody. Somebody made up a new term to get published or something. So, but I hope that after this session, the participants should be able to explain blank or describe this, or know how to use a prayer book. That's a great idea from Father Daniel. Model that, those type of things. But should have clear objectives. That serves multiple purposes. One thing, somebody new coming in should know what's going on. It's also accountability for me. Like, I want to make sure, by the time we're done with it, we did it. Any diocesan administration, dean, chancellor, bishop, will come in and say, "It's what we covered." And so those objectives, you can obsess over them or whatever, but I think just having those, it kind of gives guardrails. You should have guardrails, because I don't know, the way I am with catechism, somebody asks a question, it's oh, we're going that direction, which is probably a good thing. Most of the time, probably a good thing. But I need those objectives to get me back on track. I need that. So having those objectives is really, really helpful. Another important point is community. So I want them to get to know each other. I want them to interact. I want them to be able to ask those questions and, just be like a group. So I try to enroll catechumens as a cohort almost. Sometimes you can't do that. You get enrolled with one person. But if I can group them together, I want to do that and give them a little continuity that way. It's not a huge deal, but I think that helps. I think that's a piece of it. Another thing in education is it's called the hidden curriculum. What do I want those engaged in the curriculum or the catechism process? What do I want them to get out of it without me it's not a stated objective. It's not like, a dogmatic teaching of the faith or something. And so when I think about some of the, hidden curriculum, there's a lot of times I get questions. And I'm like, I don't know. That's a great question. Just being able to say, I don't know. That's really important. Never lie, never make up something. Now, sometimes whether I'm teaching chemistry or Orthodox Christian Catechism, I'm like, I don't know what the answer is. Let's try to think through one. Let's try to come up with one. And then that's a really good process, too. Kind of work with it and wrestle with it. And once in a while I could say, hey, give me some time to think about that. Maybe we'll talk about it next session. But I think, for them to know the priest, I'm still learning, too. I still consider myself a catechumen, right? All those priests are still deacons and subdeacons and readers. Lay people, or members of the laos, the people of God. I'm still a catechumen. I'm still learning. I hope to learn until I pass. I'm probably still learning even after that, right? So I think that's a really important thing. A lot of times, a lot of our newbies, very black and white thinking. Sometimes religious scrupulosity is becoming. It's always been there, but it's become a more common thing. So, Rachel, can I pick on you for a moment?
No, yes.
So when somebody asks a question, what's one of the most common responses that people give? Like when I ask them, like, what do you guys think about this? See if you remember. What's the one, like, when it's not a dogmatic thing?
Oh, what you mean?
Like somebody asks something that's like, it's not a straightforward answer.
Oh,
You've been in the session.
I know the answer.
Go ahead.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, or it depends.
Yeah.
So Rachel's catechized, and she sat through catechism with her daughter, who got baptized on Lazarus Saturday, right? And so she's gone through it a couple times. But one of the really important things is like, that depends. And people need to see, like we have our dogmas. We don't mess with those. As we get further and further away from that, yeah. And as we deviate further from those dogmas, we know that different jurisdictions, different liturgical traditions, things like that, and people need to know that. And I think that's important, especially with some of the baggage people bring in, into wanting to be received in the church. There are a lot of stuff we can talk about there. But all right, another thing I was asked to talk about is assessment. And this came up. I remember when Ann and I we collaborated on the St. Macrina's Institute Catechism track before, and somebody was like, they asked about assessment, like how do you know if they they master the curriculum? That's what we say in public education. I'm like, me and another guy are kind of like, I guess if you're in the kingdom of heaven, you passed, right? I can't really assess that right now, but there is assessments that happen. Like there are things now, because I'm the primary catechist, I'm the only one. I want to get more catechists. I want to get lay catechists involved. Right now, I'm the one doing it. So I'm assessing as we're, dialoguing during the catechism session. Then I still have one-on-one meetings with them throughout their catechism. But there are periods that, there's checks. And some of them, you can spread them out throughout their catechism. When I prepare to hear somebody's life confession to receive them sacramentally in church, sacramentally into the church, I ask some of the same questions my priest asked me, and then I can tack on some new ones. And it's like, do you agree with the dogmas of faith? Biggie, that's a big one. Is there any questions you still have about the faith? Which, of course, there are, but anything that's, would prevent you from being sacramentally received in the church. Another one my priest asked me, that I still ask everybody, who's your favorite, Christian relative? Mine was Aunt Jerry, who just passed away this past year. And it's like, no, because Aunt Jerry, she was a Baptist minister's daughter, and he married my mom and dad, decades ago. And my priest's like, who's your favorite Christian relative? I'm like, Aunt Jerry. Now, because she ain't Orthodox, she'd go to hell, right? I'm like, no, Father. It was a good answer. And just make sure I'm not coming in like, you're in the church, you're in, quote unquote, which is a horrible way to put it, but in quote, and if you're not Orthodox, you're out. And that's an important question. Questions I've had to tack on since then, and this usually comes out some point later than, right before you receive them, but, in the OCA, we're not big into receiving Masons and other secret organizations in the church. That usually comes up in some sort of conversation, and it has. But there's also the conversation now of like, are you a member of any other organizations? I'm only talking about this while I parishioners here, but it's somebody who, from a long time ago, wasn't received in the church, so nobody would know him. But I had a person who was a member of the Proud Boys, and I had someone from the Ohio FBI office or police inform me that this person's on a watch list and too close to a school or something like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what? I talked to Father Alexander Rentel during his time as chancellor. But the cop or the FBI officer I talked to was so helpful. I asked him, I'm like, you see this all the time. What do I do? I'm the priest. The catechize this guy. He ended up becoming before. I knew that was going to happen. So.
The battery might have died.
I'll just talk louder then. So I asked the FBI guy, what do I do with this person? How do you know he's really left it? And he actually guided me through. You get his physical paraphernalia and you burn it. And so we have a little fire pit next to the house, next to the parish. I bought the lighter fluid. And it was, I didn't make it like a liturgical sort of, it had a ceremonial aspect. There was no ceremony to it. But we burned it. And this young man, so troubled and so transformed. He didn't become Orthodox, but he is so much on a different path now than he was. And our last meeting before he's like, I think I need to go this direction. Or I think we both had tears in our eyes. But he had come so far. And so, but I have to ask that question now because that's, it's becoming, it's probably already been a thing, but it's becoming more of a thing. And so that's a legitimate assessment, through the catechism process. If you were, are you done with it? Is there anything that's going to come out where it's this person's just part of this group, and then I need to be able to vouch for them and say, yeah, that's the old man. No longer. So some of those assessments come up. They should happen throughout the catechism process, but then us clergy who are receiving them in the church, we need to ask these questions. And I had a unique experience. I was never a lay catechist, but because I did a lot of catechism in St. Gregory's for 9 years under two different rectors, even though I'm a priest, I have to make sure I'm not stepping on toes. So I'll assess various things, but the priest receiving the person in the church has to, give the final assessment. And there's certain topics I wouldn't touch. When I created a lesson on, teach the Eucharist, right? The teachings of the Eucharist. But then somebody's like, well, what about Eucharistic preparation? I'm like, that's a good new lesson. So I added it to the curriculum 10 years ago. But I didn't teach that until I was rector of the parish. I handed off, when I'm missing a Saturday because I'm serving one of the other communities hours away, or on vacation or something, I just tell the rector, hey, Mike, you're filling in for me. Teach this lesson that I don't want to teach because it's outside I don't want to go outside of my lane, outside my wheelhouse. And so you have lessons, and you want your rector involved, even as a priest. Catechizing, if I'm serving under the direction of another priest, that priest needs to make connections because he might become that confessor. So, I need this battery. All right. So, anyways, assessment is important, but it's tricky, and it could be different for everybody. I'm probably talking too long. Sorry. Use of technology in the church. I have to address that. So, I try to keep things low tech. In my chemistry classroom, I could teach the entire class. I use actual or old-fashioned graph paper notebooks. I post stuff on our Schoology page, like Facebook for students. I'll give them answer keys and stuff like that. But my goal is if there's a power outage, I could still teach class, or internet outage. I could still teach class, basically the same. Well, the same thing with catechism. I do mostly, aim for in-person. During the pandemic, I was already doing some online because I had people hours away. But during the pandemic, I streamlined it, dumped everything. I use Google Drive. Thank you, Papa.
Not to yell so much. All right. So I use Google Drive. I dumped everything in, but each lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all through 12 or 13, however many there are. Google Drive, all the lessons go in there. Extra articles. So I'm providing the other resources from the read, usually short articles. I cleaned up some old seminary papers. One of the things I require of my catechumens or inquirers, if you're going to be enrolled as a catechumen or received, you read my paper on spiritual delusion. I'm not a great writer, but when Father Hopko in his last semester saying, provides direction on that paper. It's a pretty good paper. So it's only good because of Father Hopko. But people read that because that's a really important piece of them coming into the church. So I have technology resources. Everything's available. Also, if anybody wants my Google Drive stuff, I'll give it to you. I don't really, it's not the copyright or anything, so don't copyright and sell it. That's cool. But anyways, if anybody wants my catechism stuff, feel free, even just for the objectives, make your own lessons with, maybe the objectives are useful. But, and then during catechism in person, I use Zoom. Sometimes I forget to turn it on, but I use Zoom because some people do work or they just can't come. Right? People, live an hour and a half away. They have to choose between coming Saturday or Sunday. You got to work with that. Another big thing in school instruction is differentiation of instruction. I can't differentiate for 28 chem students in a class. It sounds good, but does that really happen? Let's be honest. In parish catechism, I can, and I do. It's a smaller group. I have some people where they just look through the lessons, circle the things they ain't sure about, because really my lessons are just talking points and scriptures and stuff and quotes from the fathers and saints. And then we meet on Zoom and go one-on-one. I can't do that for everybody. We have like 20 catechumens now. When it was 5, that was easy, but 20, I can't do it for everybody, but there's some people who need it for a variety of reasons. So we have to be flexible and start meeting people where they're at. But really just the Google Drive and Zoom is the only tech stuff I usually use. So any thoughts about any of that, team?
All right, he just moved me on. All right, that's cool. Go ahead.
All right, thanks for coming, everybody. No. My name is Rick. 11 years ago, I went through this process here at the church, and I came, for those of you who don't know, I came from a very strong evangelical background. And the only comment or the twist that I want to bring to this topic is the point. Remember that everybody coming as into the catechism arena is coming from a certain perspective. So 11 years ago when I came into this, I was coming from a deep, die-hard evangelical background. When I announced to my family and to my wife's family that I was becoming Orthodox, they would have rather said that I joined the mafia. Seriously. So remember that who's ever coming in the door, we have a lot of things prepared. We're ready to go. We got theosis we're going to shove down your throat. The noose we're going to shove, and we're looking, our eyes are rolling in the back of our head. Remember, they're coming from a certain perspective. And here's the thought that maybe we could try in our churches. The adult education that Father and I do is fantastic. But remember this. Maybe tap into some of the people in your parishes that came from different backgrounds so we can connect background to background. Here's what I mean. When I came in and somebody said, oh, by the way, that couple over there, they came into the church a few years ago and they were from Wheaton Evangelical. Now, if you know anything about Wheaton country back in the day, that was like Calvin's, homeland. And immediately my antenna went, I got to talk to those people. You know why? Because Calvinists can talk to Calvinists like nobody else can. And when I'm a Calvinist coming into Orthodoxy, I may not want to talk to Father so-and-so because I got Calvinist questions. You know who can answer Calvinist questions? There you go. There you go. Because I'm going to have a certain problem with one of the tulip points, and the Greek guy is going to go, what? But the Baptist guy is going to go, well, let me tell you how I address that. Now you got me. So that's the person I want to get in touch with. If I'm coming from a Roman Catholic background, guess what? I have a total different set of questions than the evangelical has about Orthodoxy. You know who you want to pair me with? There's got to be somebody in your congregation who's a Roman Catholic convert. Yes?
The Presbyterian.
They're starting close enough, right? Pair them up. Start pairing them up. One, it gives the person who's coming in the assurance, hey, I'm not the only guy in the world. I'm not the only evangelical that came in. Now, we all know there's a million, but that's not the point. Coming in the door, I feel I'm the only evangelical in the world coming into this, right? So pair those people. Find those people in your parishes, and when you find somebody who's coming in from a different particular background, Get them involved talking, because I guarantee you they have the same questions, right? And sometimes it's better. Every denomination has their speak, correct? Come on, in Orthodoxy we have it too. We have our cliches, we have our speak, we have our language. So an evangelical coming in, if they can sit with a couple that's come in and converted, I guarantee you they're going to have the same questions and concerns. Get them talking. Get them involved in Bible studies, right? The other last thing I want to say is don't ever underestimate the value of the basics. A basic, ongoing Bible study. I don't care if one person shows up or 10 people show up. Just keep it running. Just keep it running about the basics. You know why? First of all of us need to go through it. And second of all, everybody comes into the church at a different time. Well, at the time I come in, I might not be really focused on the Eucharist because I got enough problems in my life about some other thing. I'm trying to get the Mary issue down, right? But a year later, guess what? Oh, I got the Mary thing down and I got the prostration thing down. But what about the Eucharist? What? Well, we already had that class last year. Oh, what do you mean you had it? Right? Somebody mentioned about fasting. Okay, well, I came into the church. I was already, 50 years of practice eating meat on... When you think that stopped overnight, right? To this day, my wife will go, it's Friday. I'm like, oh, French toast. Okay, all right. Whatever. Right. So the idea is my two comments would be pair with pair, like with like, because people they speak the same language, and don't underestimate the value of the basics.
Very good.
I'd just like to make a brief comment on that. I think that pairing people is a great idea, as long as the person you pair them with has recovered to the point where they're not bitter. You don't want, if somebody is a Catholic and is converted, you don't want to, pair them with the person who has bitterness against their Catholic upbringing.
Q&A time? All right.
I wanted one more comment in my experience, because I experienced this in my last parish of trying to pair. And what I'm discovering in the past 5 years is that a lot of the people that are coming now, at least in my experience, there's no way to pair them with because they're not coming from anything. Or they're so thin in their Christian experience that part of the challenge is kind of what I meant by the formlessness, is that they need help on such basic human level things. They're not wrestling with Calvinism. They're wrestling with how to brush their teeth regularly. And I say that as but I'm being serious, right? So this is why I think it's a challenge for the whole church and an opportunity for the community. There are still ex-Calvinists who come, or Calvinists who are discerning. My experience is a lot of the younger folks who are coming in families, or they're just trying to figure out Christianity. And even if that, they're trying to figure out how to live, period. So that's what I've experienced recently. I see lots of hands. So does anyone else want to have any go? We just open it up, right?
I'm eager to hear the questions.
Okay. I don't even know where to begin. You're up here, so I'll start here.
So there's this saying that an army is always preparing for the last war that it fought.
Yes.
And so I think that we are, like to what you just said, we are really prepared to talk to Protestants about Orthodoxy. We are not as prepared to talk to people who are coming from no religious affiliation of Orthodoxy.
No, or pagan, because I've also had lots of
pagans,
Wicca and witches and all sorts of stuff coming in, and Neo-Nordic stuff, because the internet has created the breeding grounds.
So I did this whole, I got this class on Mary, and I got this whole thing on Mary, and then, oh, Mary's cool. It's like, oh, well, what do you talk about, I was ready to go.
Yeah. Doing Father John.
Father, I wanted to circle back on something you mentioned earlier on. Kind of this notion of the visibility of the catechumenate in our churches. So I think we all know that, let's say pre-pandemic, the conversions were small. It was, a few, maybe a few here or there, somebody's marrying into the church or something. So for all intents and purposes, having a large-scale catechumenate, that was extinct in the Orthodox Church, at least certainly in the modern era. And so I think one of the challenges now that we're doing at large scale is trying to engage the whole community, the parish community in the process. I mean, we want to make sure they have visibility of what's going on with receiving these people. You know, and as Orthodox, we have a lot of prayers, we have rituals that kind of go together, and that's what's elevated to the parish, to the congregation, to see what's going on, right? And so in the early church, they'd have the dismissal of the catechumens, and they'd all leave the church. Not that we're going to make them do that now, right? But what are the kinds of things maybe we can do to sort of elevate that visibility of the catechumen with our current faithful?
So think about components of a catechism program, which has a community aspect of it. Layers I've had to add on. So like once again, I was a associate priest catechist for a while, and then after I became parish rector, I'm like, wait a second, did we ever receive somebody who didn't participate in our outreach program for the needy? I'm like, oh my gosh. So like nobody gets received or enrolled if they haven't served our neighbors in need at least once. Usually they do it more times, but at least once. And that's going to get in with parishioners who are also serving, but also we have a lot of communities around St. Gregory's. Our parish community, our campus community of Ohio State, our neighborhood community of Poor, and then our cemetery community up the road. We have a pan-Orthodox cemetery. And I'm like, you're supposed to get to know all them communities. They're all important communities to know. And so also, I realized people are like, all the young adult, usually young adult, not always, but young adult catechumens like stick together. I actually had to preach once about catechumens shouldn't be catechizing catechumens. Anybody have that? Right? Anybody have that? Yeah, so don't be doing that. Now part of their catechism is I'll look through the directory. I don't do it consistently. If somebody's a social butterfly, I know it's fine. But if they're just talking to the same people weekly coffee social, I assign them people who've been around for like more than 8 years. I was like, you need to meet so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. Forcing it. We've done parish birthday parties and namesday parties where you sit with the month of your birthday or namesday. That's mixed up. Even my own family members like, oh, I got to talk to so-and-so. My daughters who are kind of shy, they've met more Christians doing that. They've been in the church their whole life, So it's that community aspect is so important. I try to tell people, you got to have brothers and sisters lean on when stuff hits the fan, time of troubles or local parish issue. They have to be ready to lean on each other because the relationships are key. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
I have a couple of things I've seen other parishes do. We don't do this at my parish, but that I thought were good ideas. One is during the litany of the catechumens. I've seen in some parishes they have the catechumens step forward and then get a blessing at the end of the prayer for the catechumens. Also, this is just my personal pet peeve. I would like to see us stop singing over the litany for the catechumens, since we got, maybe a quarter of the people out there might be catechumens in some churches. Let them hear the words. I have to say, there's a litany that you don't hear. This is what it says. So.
I think Father Paul is probably next.
Father Paul?
Yes, just briefly, I think we also need to carry this forward to what we also as professional counselors call aftercare. Because many of our catechumens are coming in, they're preparing themselves, they're studying, they're chrismated, they're baptized, and then after a couple of months, after 6 months, we lose them.
Yep.
And that's because they have false expectations, which is normal. I mean, we're always going to have expectations that are going to be different from the reality that we experience. So I think being sure to practice our catechumenate with good sponsors, and I think Rick's point too was exactly that if you have nuns, then find a nun, or find somebody who had nothing and that they can connect to and make sure that they deepen and develop this relationship. Because ministry is relational, as Archbishop Paul would say, at the very core. But to make sure that there's going to be a letdown. Many of our young men come in and they're struggling with addiction to pornography. And they think that once I get chrismated, it's all going to go away. Well, guess what? It's going to get harder. in a lot of ways, because you've received more, and the intensity of this struggle will also be more in this kind of parallel way. And that's one example of the issues. So we need to kind of have that one-on-one, and then also for a parish to begin from the very time that they're kind of committed to the parish as catechumens, to be looking for how they can invest themselves in terms of their stewardship. What can I offer? What can I start to offer? What can I think about offering in this community? Because that tells the catechumen, that tells this new member that the church values, this community values what they have as their own unique gifts. So that's one of the challenges of this catechumenate, though, is dealing with these expectations, and then the fact that we may lose 30 to 40 to 50% of these people that we are chrismated into our church if we are not vigilant over this kind of what I'm calling pastoral aftercare. You know, but that was just what godparents did from the very beginning, right? That's what the godparents were for, to keep these people, to protect them, to pray for them, and to help them along.
I'm just going to go this way. So, Peter.
I think to kind of add on to Father Paul's point, like, I'm not a priest or a catechist, but I'm like an involved parishioner, and like my wife and I open our home, like, I think that we could play a big role in the aftercare. And I guess my question is, like, what are things that if you could tell all of your parishioners, like, this would be so meaningful for people coming to the church if you X, Y, and Z. Because that's where we're kind of finding ourselves in this position where it's like, okay, we have all these catechumens, like, I don't know. Like, I like having people over and building community, but it's like, what does that look like? What do you think what people at your parish could do for them? Yeah.
So this is why I started off, and I think because of this, I'll just call it the surge. I don't know what else to call it. I'm just going to call it that. That this is a great opportunity for our churches, to everyone to grow, because it comes in. It's not just the priest's problem. It's not just the bishop's problem. It's not just the seminary's problem or whatever. It's every church's, as a community, being able to see the challenge before them and in some ways repent, and in other ways just grow into things. Because I think as I go, so much, especially experiencing, I'll just say the suburbanization of church life, where everyone kind of lives in their silos and they go to church in order to fulfill their Sunday obligation, to borrow Roman terms. But, you know, that is there's like this bare minimal existence. And the challenge that people are reacting to is that what we have before us is going to require a lot more out of us. And so I think what you're doing, opening your home to have Bible studies, or just creating community, because most of the people that are coming in right now, part of the reason they want to come in, besides solving their issues, quote unquote, is that they're really, 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 really lonely.
Yeah.
So if you aren't blessed to be able to have the ability to teach, as the Apostle Paul, and I love the hymnody from the Feast of Pentecost, like, everybody has gifts. And some of that, just having coffee with people, being a point of contact and a face where you know who they are, and when you see them, you can connect with them. Because not everyone's called to serve in every ministry, and some of this just seems like really basic and simple, but the reality in my experience of churches is, like, as we all know, 5% of the people who are at the church are the ones really making it function. To get that more like 15 or 20%, the people who are invested in other people through hospitality, just getting to know people, that would help with retention. Michael.
Years ago, I had a client, and the lady at the front desk was given a title. They gave her a plaque on her desk, and she was called the Director of First Impressions. And so there is a process before the process. It is really important, and we've had this experience of having bad greeters. You have you have the person who is a former Roman Catholic, and they're the first person they meet, and they're a former Roman Catholic. And she just told all the bad things about Catholicism. And we found a guy who is the perfect greeter. You have to give that first impression, and somebody that is a nun comes into the church and they're looking at her, what the heck is this? The incense, the candles, why is everybody kissing an icon? What is an icon to begin with? You have to give them a service book. You have to direct them if they have any questions and meet them coming out. So there is a process before the process.
This is reminding me of something that I remember listening to. Oh my goodness. Who's the priest of St. Spiridon's, the Greek church in Colorado?
Father Evan.
There is a series of lectures that he gives, I believe it's just on ancient faith. It might even be on YouTube at this point, where he's talking about you stepping back and trying to see what it is like if you were to walk into your church and not know anything, and then try to basically reverse engineer about how, if somebody's walking into your church, what that experience would be like, so that you can try to equip them as much as possible and meet them where they're at. I know I just responded. Does anyone have any responses to Peter? Or okay, I'm just going to keep going around the room. Father Justin?
So one of the challenges I've noticed in my parish is people come in, they have knowledge about theology. Obviously, I'm ready to teach them about that. One of the areas that surprises me now compared to 10 years ago is how little moral formation people have. And Orthodox is not very moralizing. We're not in your face about, like, you do all these things good, you're good. We have moral teaching, but it's very subtle sometimes. Do you have any suggestions or advice about how any of you are teaching, meeting this need for moral formation and moral instruction?
I mean, I have also experienced this, and that means I incorporate it into my class where I talk about what the teachings of the church, but also the pastoral reality. Father Hopko's, the 4 volumes, he addresses things in marriage, sexuality, those kind of things. I know there's more than just that, but he addresses more than that. I like to go to that because I think we need to talk about all the sacraments. How many situations where people did not know the teaching of the church or the practice of the church around marriage and divorce and remarriage, and then they're 3 years into the Orthodox Church and they never heard anything about you need a bishop's blessing in order to get a second marriage, right? All those kind of things that you need to think about, and that means you have to go there. You have to, and then maybe that needs finessing, and you need to do that with your priest. But I think you have to be upfront, because I think a lot of people come in, and this goes across all visions of life, I'll say it like that, that there's going to be things that you're going to need to talk about that would offend a proud boy, or that would offend, would make them stumble and think about what they're getting themselves into, as opposed to somebody on the other side of the spectrum of a proud boy. Does anyone else want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember for years I used the Orthodox Church by Timothy Ware as the standard text that we'd use, and I realized at some point there's nothing in there really about basic Christian morality. Yep. It's assumed that you know that, and so I constructed my own lesson around the virtues and vices and describing each one of those. And then Father Hopko's series, The Orthodox Faith, has a volume on spirituality, which basically does that. I didn't know that at the time, so it's a resource for that.
Yeah.
So one of the things we talked about is in Indianapolis, we refer to it as Orthodoxy 201, the following up with people. Yes. One of the things that has helped us, because we had so few people to start with, and now we've got this huge influx, it's been difficult even to find sponsors for everybody. Yep. But what has really tremendously helped us is we have a very strong men's group, and we have a very strong women's group. And the older people in those groups, not just older in age, but those who have been in the church longer, serve as mentors to our young men who are coming in, to our young ladies who are coming in. and guide them along. And that's where they yes, we have a catechism class, but a lot of Orthodox living, they learn from their peers in either the men's group or the women's group.
That was one of the things, Father John, that I was going to mention is creating brotherhood or sisterhood is one of the things I've done at my last parish and starting right now is exactly this. Titus 2, where there needs to be the older teaching the younger. I think part of the challenge that comes from that is making sure as the priest, because if you do all of these things, you are definitely ensuring more work as a priest.
Yes.
Because that means a whole lot more elbows rubbing against each other and the possibility of conflict.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you just need to be ready for that because that's the reality. And the challenge that I think we have is that, I'll be frank, there's some of the older generation, I don't necessarily want them to teach certain practices to the younger ones because they don't have very good practices in place.
Right.
So you have to be discerning about how you employ those things and who you put to head or lead the charge, as it were, to do these things, because you may massively regret it.
Yeah. It helps that one of the leaders of my men's group is also my catechist.
Do you want to have any responses? Yes.
So just to give you a point of where I'm coming from in Green Bay, we've brought in 45 new people just this year. We're the only church within an hour and a half drive, so we're kind of the only game in town from that perspective. So, question kind of to the group: length of time for the learning. Now, I got a number of them, so just hold on. Right, because 6 months, 12 months, whatever. Okay, and then if we could get comment on the pressure that this is putting on the priests. I can tell what's going on here. Demographics, men versus women. Any thoughts on that? Godparents. I think we might have to teach godparents. Oh, yes. I need a candle?
Yes.
Right? And then the new people in our church, we're kind of blessed. We kind of have like 2 fellowship halls, kind of one down and one above. And the newer folks seem to go above. So some gray-haired guy with glasses usually walks up there and asks people, I thank them for volunteering to help vacuum the room, right, or other things. And they are more than willing to do things, but they don't really know what to do, so you kind of have to ask them. So I just gave you a whole laundry list there, and there was something that spurred out a length of time. Maybe
I'll take the first one. I'll let somebody else take the other one. All right, length of time I think is really important. I remember I taught my district. I have a really good school district teach that. They appreciate I'm a priest, and so they've had me teach like religious diversity classes for teachers and educators, so they know like how to handle the First Amendment in public schools. And it's really fun. I really enjoy doing it. But I bring in the different faiths that are in Central Ohio, and this one rabbi, and he was originally trained to be an educator, so he was one of my better presenters, probably better than me in some ways, Rabbi Rick. And Rabbi Rick, he'd share rabbinic wisdom as far as, because one of the teachers, an English teacher in my building, she's like, hey, what if I want to become Jewish? I live in the part of town with a lot of Jewish people. And I don't know if anybody else knows this, but rabbinic wisdom for like somebody wants to be Jewish. Somebody goes up to the rabbi, hey, I want to be Jewish. Rabbi ignores them. Second time, so they want to be Jewish. Ignore them. If you ask the third time, oh, okay, you're serious about it, And I'm like, of course, we're not going to do that. But there's a hint of granular wisdom to that. And you have to be very slow and cautious. When I hear, another jurisdiction, like collaborate with priests and things like that, 2 or 3 months. I remember on one of your Facebook group, I think this was a question or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, so I've kind of learned that other OCA priests can feel free to chime in and correct me. I've heard like a year-ish, right? I mean, somewhere in that year. Now, some people are going to be sooner. If somebody's getting married, they already have a stable Orthodox other person to keep them on track. I'm sorry, and nothing against 25-year-old guys in here or whatever, but if you're a 25-year-old single guy, you come to the Orthodox church, you want to be Orthodox, you're going to wait a while. I mean, is this the flavor of the month? Is this the fad? It just satisfies your intellectual whatever. We got to make sure that's to the best of our abilities. No guarantees in this, but they need the time. And I joke, I don't do this really, but I joke, I'm like, Your goal as an inquirer, you want to be Orthodox yesterday. If I'm doing my job, I should give you a reason not to be Orthodox. If you still want to be Orthodox, all right, game on. You know, and I think, I don't do that.
He's very good at that.
Thanks, Rachel.
They need to show
2
they have
years.
skin in the game.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
need to show they want it.
I'm,
If the bar is too low in entry, then
I'm continuing to make it more and more like this is part of it. Every time I get this glitch where it's like I almost made a mistake of receiving people, just didn't know hardly anybody in the church, and it came out. My priestly spidey senses, I said, was tingling, and I'm like, I started asking questions. I'm like, okay, we're gonna put off the baptism. It's okay, but what's best for you, And everybody's different. Once again, for some people, 9 months, fine.
22 months.
22 months. Some people need 2 or 3 years. I always say my wife was a catechumen 3 years, and I was like, a few months as far as being formally enrolled, but I've been only going to church about 9 months. And both of our priests received us correctly, but because of very unique circumstances. But I tell people, you're going to fall somewhere between my length of catechism and my wife's. That's it, And but that, my priest taught an old tailor saying, measure 9 times and cut once. So careful. And one of these seminary graduates 20 years from now, they should do a sociological study. If it's this surge of converts, I'm really freaking out, like how many still going to be in the church? It's really it weighs on me. I'm sure it weighs on all of you. All of us who are catechism priests and as servants of Christ's church. So, all right, somebody else take one of the other questions.
does anyone want to talk about the men and women thing? Because I think this is all we're reflecting on is the fact that our culture is the way that it is, right? And it affects us massively because we don't live outside of our culture. I don't know how we will address, quote unquote, or attempt to address the young male challenge until we have the older men ready to step up to fill the gap that is obviously there. It's not just men, but I think that's why I think a brotherhood or sisterhood or some aspect of mentorship has to be in place. And it's going to not be questions about the Trinity. It's going to be questions about how to get a job, how to make a resume, how to actually, as they say, #adult now, adulting, right? It's become a verb to actually live and grow up.
How to talk to women.
How to talk to women in a respectful norm. I don't know if normal is the right word. Respectful Christian way. Ways that should be normative. Brother Herman, yes, save me.
On that point, one of the most popular TikTok channels is an older man who teaches men how to tie ties.
Yeah. But to change your tire, change the oil on your car, yeah. How are we on time? Are we okay?
We're okay.
We're okay.
I feel like everyone is invested. So
Keep it going.
I just wanted to just add something to the notion that we can't, once we receive them, once they're received and baptized or chrismated, we don't abandon them. And the early catechumenate programs, largely it came out of the West, but I think more people are doing it even in the East now, have a program for the newly received.
Yes.
And so the original term was mystagogia, but
yes.
we at my parish, we do continue to meet with the newly baptized or newly received. And during the first fasting period that comes up, we have a retreat for the newly received, and we talk with them, or we have prayer services specifically for the new members, and then involve other members of the parish in that part of the program also, because sometimes we've had problems where sometimes there's a discernment that needs to be there because the people who want to be part of the catechesis phase are not the people you want to be part of the catechesis phase.
Yeah.
And so it's brought to our attention the need for catechesis for existing members in addition to the new people with the surge. So balancing those things is is a challenge. But do any of you ever work with programs for the newly received, and how do you try to involve them gradually into the life of the parish?
So I think, feel free to redirect me if my answer is like straying from what you're asking. So it's kind of this, once, like I said, I wouldn't receive somebody unless they've already served in our parish outreach program for the needy. Other parish ministries, it depends. I think a good question, Claudia, you should talk about sometime, catechumens sing in the choir. Some choirs are much more open to that, it's a legitimate debate, I think. And I'm of two minds even sometimes about it, but they should have some experience in the ministries that are appropriate. Father Dan Rental, blessed memory, found of St. Greg's, I just get to ride on his coattails. It's like, if you're a member of this parish, I think I mentioned this yesterday, you are involved in at least one ministry. If you're a member here, no matter who you are, you're involved. Now let's try to discern what that direction is. An existing ministry, maybe we have a new talent, it's a new ministry. But it's just, if anybody who's a communicant of the church is not involved in the ministry, they're not doing their job. And that's just a culture, that's just part of the culture of the parish. So does that help? You can tell me.
Pretty much. I'm trying to gauge whether there are programs that I may be not aware of for something that would be parallel to the old mystagogia approach, where you do have continuing education for the newly